On this project, I created my fantasy leaf blade shape using the process of stock removal. I then ground in the bevels on the blade. The next step was the hours of hand sanding. To save you the pain that I went through in this process, I've condensed the hand sanding into about 6 seconds on this video. The blade was then painted white in preparation for etching my artwork. The first hand-drawn version of my original artwork is always far too large to fit onto a blade, so I must reduce its size on a copier. The smaller image is then traced onto transfer paper using a soft lead pencil. The transfer paper is then positioned onto the blade, so I can retrace the entire image yet again to replicate my original drawing onto the white painted blade. After removing the transfer paper, I must often go over my drawing with a pencil yet again to darken the lines on the blade. Now it is time to begin preparations for the first etching cycle. Since the white paint acts as a resist to the ferric chloride I will use to etch, I scratch away all of the paint from the background of my picture using a series of different styles and sizes of needles. Removing paint will allow the acid to bite into the steel, but only at the places where I have revealed bare steel. Exposing all of the background is often the longest preparation step in etching artwork. This next 90 seconds of the video represents 8 hours of work in preparation for the first etch. With all of the background resist finally removed, I now apply nail polish to all of the fine edges of the blade in order to further protect the blade from any unwanted etching. I am placing the blade in its first ferric chloride bath, where it will remain for about an hour, at which time I pull it out and neutralize any remaining acid on the blade with a mixture of baking soda and water. I'm turning the page to preparing for the second etch. Here I only removed paint from the lines on the dragon's belly and on his back, shoulder, and arm. Turning the page again, after the blade spent 45 more minutes back in the acid, I am now preparing the third etch by removing all of the paint from the dragon's belly and scratching in the scales on the upper half of the dragon's body. Turning the page to the fourth etch. The third etching session was another 45 minutes in the ferric chloride. Preparation for the fourth etch is once again very time consuming. I scratch in all of the scales on the portion of the dragon below the guard in my picture. Then I remove all of the resist from the blade in the picture as it lies behind the bottom portion of the dragon. Finally, I remove the paint from the upper half of the dragon's body. This must be etched prior to the hilt of the blade, since the dragon's upper body lies behind the hilt. It is important to plan out what resist you will remove during each preparation step prior to starting any etching. If you're planning, you must always keep your perspective of your artwork in mind. As I'm getting ready for the fifth etching cycle, I'm now going to focus on parts of the image that are further into the foreground. I scratch in all of the scales for the arm and the hands of the dragon. I also remove all of the resist from the hilt in the picture, being very careful around the delicate hands and claws of the dragon. Finally, all of the paint from the lower portion of the dragon's body is removed. The preparation for the sixth etch will be the last full etching cycle for this project. I'm removing all of the paint from the dragon's arms and hands, as well as from one of its horns, the one that appears farthest into the background. And I'm removing the paint from the lower jaw. After removing the blade from the sixth etch and neutralizing the remaining acid, I remove all of the remaining resist from the blade using acetone. This leaves a bare blade, but as you can see, your artwork is not very visible at this stage. The blade, now without any resist, is going back into the ferric chloride acid for about 20 more minutes. The goal here is to even out the edges of the last portion of my image that were never etched, mainly around the dragon's head. After leaving the acid for the final time, I will finally get to sand down the blade and reveal how well my artwork has etched into the steel. This is always the most exciting part of a very long process. The entire blade is now cold blued. The cold bluing will create shadows in the deeper recesses of the work. After applying the bluing, I do a final wet sanding using 2000 grit sandpaper. Here is a quick look at the finished piece. I created the hilt furniture from solid brass and carved the handle from purple heart wood. A 10mm purple zirconia was set into the pommel. This was all done off camera. Thanks so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like it, please subscribe to my channel.